Good Saturday morning. Welcome everyone to Getting Back to Zero. It's uh busy weekend in the Graham household. We actually have a what's local group that's actually through my AA thing, but it's a sobriety group called Camel Stock, kind of off of Woodstock. They've done it for years, but they have all sorts of at a campsite, all sorts of bands and speakers and all sorts of goings on, food, crafts. I don't know. I'll probably buy a couple T-shirts this year, but I'm going to go hang out there this afternoon and this evening, see some of the music and try to film some, maybe even interview some people. So I might have some of that on a future show. But I wanted to have my day off to a good start, and there is no better way to get the weekend off to a great start than bringing in this guest from over across the way. Zeynep is back in the house, and hopefully we've got some good audio so people can actually, or video, they can look at you and not just stare at me for an hour and hearing you talk. So welcome.
Hey Jeff, how are you doing?
I am great. It's you are so much fun to talk to. I get so much insight and just feel goodness after talking with you. It's always so I'm just thrilled as you're joining us this morning. How are things going way over there?
Well, things are going as crazy as they are everywhere else in the world with the pandemic and climate change and everything. But for me, as far as keeping sober goes, things are going well. Staying in touch with my AA community, with my TLC community. Glad to have opportunities like this and friends like you to connect with. So all
It's
is well.
it's critical. I was looking, and you are the only Zeynep I've ever met or heard of in my life. Is that how did they come up with that name? That's got to be the rarest name on the planet, because I have never heard
Funny
the
you
name
should say
Zeynep.
that because I was just telling you about that right before we went live.
I still don't believe it,
Zay,
but
I know I got that my whole life. Like, wow, what a cool name. And I'm like, guys, you have no idea. What I would say, it's kind of like Sarah in Turkey. But right now, just before coming on, I was just curious and I had some time to kill and I looked it up. And it's been among the top 5 most common names in Turkey since the 1920s. Since 1980, the year I was born, it's been the #1 most popular name. So that's why I said I always put the S afterwards, and it's not an AA, you know, thing. I know that's how people do that in AA, but I've always had to do that my whole life because there's always like 5 Zeyneps in every room I walk into.
that's
So
crazy.
yeah.
Well, we obviously have some people that don't know your story, and your story is could be 8 hours long, and it would be the best 8 hours anyone's ever listened to. But
Especially
just
with the
bring
way I would tell it.
you just you've lived a lifetime, that's for sure. But what is just go ahead and recount a little bit of what your story and how you got here today.
Okay, well, I'm going to be 4 years sober in September, and I'm still waiting for this story to be able to like filter down to a nice, neat
Yeah,
little.
concise.
Yeah, I'm like, how do people do that? Like they have a beginning and an end in like 15, 20 minutes. And I'm just like, I'm all over the place all the time and I always get nervous. But my story, very briefly, is I was born in Turkey and I lived here most of my life, but I had a little bit of back and forth with North America during kindergarten and first grade. I was in Pittsburgh when my mom was working at the university there, and then I went back for college. But I was born as the only child to 2 professors, and as far as I'm told, I was always a very mature, very nice little girl. You know, never like always well behaved is kind of like the way they describe me. And so I've been academically pretty successful and had good role. My parents were very high achiever role models, but I guess I probably didn't try alcohol till like the regular dances in high school. And I didn't necessarily have a crazy, love affair with it like the first several times I tried it. But towards the end of high school, I did develop an eating disorder. And that's how like my first thing came out. And so something did start happening there. When I went to college again, I don't like, we had a place on campus where there was drinking. There was a pub right off campus. I remember a friend of mine getting me a fake ID, and I don't necessarily recall being that crazy about it at the time. I'd go out and go to parties, but I don't remember being, around the keg all the time or anything. But it definitely made its way very creepily into my life very quickly. And actually, when I told my story, I always told it as like I wasn't aware how bad it was, how early on. But I was telling you last week, I was doing my fourth and fifth steps in AA, and I looked over some journals and saw how early on I actually was aware that it was a problem. And I guess a bit important factor in my family is that my maternal grandfather was an alcoholic. And my mother never touched alcohol, but her demons were different. She was the, severe workaholic. Her emotional ups and downs would be quite extreme. And so I guess there must have been some effects of that. But yeah, so college was pretty normal. I don't recall being that crazy about it. But then I came to Turkey and got into advertising. And there, I think it really started, it seemed common. And I also had this feeling of, I've been such a good girl. I've been to all the proper schools. I've gotten all the grades. I've gotten all the GPAs. And there's just something in me that wasn't being processed in a healthy way that wanted to come out in a form of rebellion. So I felt like I'm allowed to do this. Everyone, I'm 20 years old. Now's the time to do this, or something like that.
You don't come across as having any confidence issues whatsoever.
Oh
So,
my God.
I look at myself, I had so many anxieties and fears and insecurities. Alcohol was an easy solution for me.
Mm-hmm.
It was the number one solution to let me be temporarily who I wasn't, but I always wanted to
Mm-hmm.
be. You come across as very confident. So did you have those issues or?
I did, but I'm noticing that now. I didn't think I did at the time. Like at the time, I was like, I've never had like I can talk in front of people. I appear confident, but now looking back on some of my journals, I can see that I always had self-esteem issues. And I think part of it probably came from like the back and forth of, going to the States as a Turkish girl and for not knowing English, then coming back and forgetting my Turkish, and then going back in college. And I can see remnants in those notes of never quite feeling like I belonged. Like this is home, but I kind of miss being there. And then that's kind of home, but I miss being here. And I don't know. There was definitely self-esteem issues. Like I have all these notes of, you know, I went out last night and so and so said I was cool. So and so said she wanted to hang out more with me, blah blah. And I've written all these things like compliments I've received, but it's like I'm I'm not really believing them. I'm like, yeah, what's up with that? They said crazy stuff like that last night to me. Can you believe it? Is like what I've written in my journal. So I don't know. I guess I've always been like, I, I have a strong front, a very rational front, a very, composed front. And I think that's part of what created like that need for drinking. And I wasn't in touch with my fears and my insecurities and my emotions at all. And I think that really, it was all those that I was pressing down that needed to be, addressed. So now the more I look at it, the more I see it as, no wonder I was self-medicating. I didn't know how to cry. I didn't know how to ask for help, that kind of stuff. But
It's
yeah.
interesting because I'm very into that self-analysis, just trying to figure this whole thing out. And I know that I believe there's definitely the physical component for sure. Just
Mhm.
because I know of others, how they drink or react when they drink. And my wife, for a perfect example, how she doesn't react when she drinks versus how I do. But I also look at the mental set. I think the upbringing, whether it was trauma, uh, perceived or even not even perceived, but for me, the anxieties, the lack of self-confidence was huge. And I just, when hearing your story, I could just feel the pain of being transferred from this school back and forth,
Mhm.
making friends, losing friends. That's got to be a lot for someone.
Yeah, that, and like I think like that's the thing about, now the popular thing is talking about the capital T and the little T traumas. And like I don't have any really capital T traumas, but for example, I do recall my parents were always, they never pressured me about school. My dad was always like, do your best, buddy, and that's good enough, and just be a good sport. You put in your best effort. But I think it was the expectation that I created because of the way the world perceived my parents. And as a kid, I saw them as, oh my God, they're so smart. They're both professors. They're doing these really idealistic things. And therefore, my inner world created that expectation on myself. Like they never verbalized anything like that. They were like, good try, buddy, but you never know how your mind works when you're a kid. So yeah, there's all that. So
I am kind of I look at society, and we do not, with our kids, and I'm as guilty of this as anyone, but we do not let them be themselves. Everything is,
mhm.
we dump them into all these sports camps, and so that they can learn to be something that they're not right now. So they can be, so the message I fear that we're sending is, you're not good enough
You're not good
in what
enough.
you are. So because of that, I'm gonna put you in this camp so you can learn how to be, someone that, obviously you're not that person that you need to be. So we're sending a message, you need to be, whether, I grew up with athletics, the pro athlete, the best. And if you're not, well, then we'll get you in, you need to work harder, you need to train more.
Mm-hmm.
There was never I never felt, hey, you are perfect just the way you are. And I don't know if
Yes.
they're if we weaken kids by not giving them a little bit of that, to aspire to be better and to grow.
Mm-hmm.
But we definitely send a message: you're not thin enough, you're not uh stacked enough. For girls, your hair's not what, there's all these, so
Yeah.
you need to be different than you are. You're not good enough, you need to look better, you need to all these things, perform better.
Yeah, we definitely
And we
don't give them
fail.
enough.
We
Yeah,
fail
we
at that. It's
definitely don't
impossible.
give enough, and we don't role model enough of like, screw it. It's no big, it's not important. There's definitely a bit of that message lacking. Like we do say it's all right, but there's always that underlying tone of, you'll do better next time. You'll just
Hmm.
try harder next time. There's no like, no, we love you as you are. You're totally fine. Forget about it. Some
It's got
people,
to be
you're
a
just not.
balance. I mean, we don't
Yeah.
want, we
Yeah.
don't want, I don't want my kids to think, oh, just sit around and do nothing. I want them to try to achieve and get better. But at the same
Yeah.
time, I don't want them to feel like failures, that I'm disappointed in them, or they should be disappointed in themselves if they don't reach that.
Hmm. Yeah. So do you want
Well,
me to get to the juicy part of my
all
story
right.
that you've been hearing?
We want to hear the goods, the good stuff.
The good stuff, the most embarrassing stuff, the stuff I want to forget, and you keep reminding me every time.
Exactly.
Tell me about that time.
We want dirt on a Saturday morning.
Okay. You want to hear where it gets all dirty.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, like I said, I was in advertising back in Turkey. I was living with my parents, and there was it's very common to drink in advertising. It's part of the professional world, so it seemed. And I thought, here I am networking with the best. I just, get off work at 8, go for a nice cold one, and talk to all these people. But patterns were that I would always go out with the intention of, you after work, you go, you have a couple of drinks and you go home. But I would never be able to make it back home. Like there's always like, okay, I'll go home at 10. And then if I go to bed at midnight, I should be fine tomorrow. And somehow I'd always find myself at like lights being turned on at 2 a.m. and be like, shit, didn't I just do that like the last 3 days over the weekend? Why am I doing that on a Monday?
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, that started sending, worrisome signals to my parents. But at the same time, I was still in that mind state of, I'm in advertising and I've been the good girl. I've done all my homework. I've always been like the poster child for, achievement and academics and this and that. So there's part of me that was saying, I'm entitled. This is me getting my yayas out. I've never done anything bad my whole life. So, now's the time kind of attitude. But it went a little too far. And I had a couple of incidents where like these like not coming homes were quite often, but a couple of incidents where I actually like fell down the stairs at 5 a.m, went to get stitches, but then somehow ended up ditching the hospital without paying the bill. And the hospital called my parents. And one Sunday morning, I walk home and like the whole family council is sitting there and they have decided that I'm going to be sent into an institution like within the next week. And these were all the times where like I always knew there is alcoholism in my family. And I did have that sneaking sense of, I think I like this a bit too much. Like I really look forward to that 5 o'clock to come to go and grab that first beer. I
Great
kind of
point.
I had that sense, but then again, I was like, but it's too early to really worry about it. And at that point, I had enough of like, but look at so and so, how you always
Mm-hmm.
compare yourself to everyone. That's much worse, that person's been drinking there every day for the past 40 years and I'm only
Yeah.
22. What else am I going to do? So I had all these justifications and everything. But I did have a sneaking sense that it was a problem. But when the family imposed upon me to go into an institution, then I was mad because I already knew something was not quite right. And when I had that outside force tell me, you have to do this, I was like, who are you to tell me whether or not I have a problem? And I was like, you don't even know my classmates who are, getting drunk on airplanes
Yeah.
or and doing that. And it's not like I ever passed out. It's not like I ever puke at the end of the night and all these justifications. So I think now looking back on my journals, there's a lot of confusion there. There's a lot of like, I wanted someone to ask me what was wrong and like how I felt the need for someone to actually reach out and say, how do you like, why do you feel the need to drink so much? What's going on? But no one really said what's going on. They just said, you drink too much and you need to stop. So I think that really backfired. So when I was in this institution, I have a couple of incidents where I would jump off over the wall and with like an IV needle still stuck in my arm and go to the pub down the street and be like, hey, I only got $3, but can you give a girl something? And sneaking back in and I actually found this journal like a couple of weeks ago. I've written down like, I wonder if I should do this. I wonder if I should do that. And like, so I went to the store, walked straight back in with 8 beers in my bag and no one even checked. So now I'm in my room in the institution and it's still boring and like, it's crazy stuff. But so this
Right.
was around 2005. This was around when I was 24. And then once I was out of the institution, that gave me more reason to be angry at people and to say, you don't get it. And I'll fix this if I damn well decide it needs fixing and the time is not now. And, you don't get to talk about this. And from then on, it just got worse and worse. And basically, the rest of the story is there were 2 major pretty toxic relationships that now I see I got myself into because they were just made it so much easier for me to get away from my parents, make it easier for me to drink, make it easier for me to, people who said, oh, I'm practically retired. How about you quit your job and come travel with me and we can, go to Ibiza and be like, oh, I love you.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, So it got really bad. It was just a lot of partying for a long time, and a lot of basically my, and part of me was like, I always took a bit of pride in being able to keep up with the boys. And, everyone would pass out at a certain point in the night, and I'd be like, I'm always the last man standing. That makes me a strong girl. That makes me a tough girl. That makes me a cool girl. And I liked the person that I became when I drank. I felt a lot more confident, a lot more charismatic, funny, smart. Like, I felt like, oh, people love the Zeynep that shows up at the pub. And I didn't feel like that Zeynep when I was in the office during the day. I didn't feel like that Zeynep when we visited relatives and were having a cup of tea. I liked the other Zeynep that showed up. So I just lived into that, and she started taking over a lot. And basically, there's a time at one point around 2010, I moved to Canada, to Vancouver, and it got to the point where my health got really bad. I was living a life in between the pub and my bed, nothing else, and like completely withdrawn from anything real in life. And I drank myself to a point where I was unable to get help myself. Like, now looking back on it, like, Vancouver has a very vibrant recovery community, but I was past the point of looking into AA for myself or anything. Like, to the point of, I lost tremendous amount of weight. I developed neuropathy. So I was walking with a cane, and I didn't know where to ask for help. And we have a year and a half episode with my significant other at the time, where we decided to move into an RV and leave the city, thinking, we'll be in nature. That'll be good. We'll get away from these things. But it was just we were both enabling each other. So most of our RVing time was spent around planning, okay, we'll hook up at night, and then next morning we got to drive all the way over to Walmart to grab 240 cases, and then come back and hook the RV again. And then we'll just unhook the next time we run out of beer, was kind of the way it went. So,
did you want help at this point yet, or did you just know that you probably needed help?
I think I think somewhere it shifted from, like, there's a point where I knew it was a problem, but I didn't feel ready. There was a point where I knew it was a problem and I wanted help, but I wasn't feeling heard. And that was around like 25 years old or something. And then somewhere it just shifted to a point of, I don't know. I don't even know where to start fixing this. I don't know what one does about this. So it was like, I wake up in the morning, I feel absolutely terrible about myself. Like, what the fuck am I doing with my life? I'm such a failure. I'm such a disgrace. And I'm such a lost cause that I'm just going to go down the street and start drinking as soon as the pub opens, to drink that pain away, because I just don't know where to start fixing my life from. And it just started feeling like it was already too late. And so basically I did that to a point where it got to a point where I had to pick up the phone. And my parents obviously at this point were very much aware, but had been told very clearly, like, you can't save her, unless she makes that decision. You just got to sit and pray, hold tight and hope for the best. But it got to a point where I picked up the phone and I said, guys, you have to book me a plane ticket, buy me a ticket, fly me home, find me a doctor, do something. I'm not well. And thank God they did that. They did all their research here. And I flew from Vancouver back to Istanbul, and within a couple of weeks, I was in an inpatient treatment. And the way that went was, there was because I lost so much weight and there was the eating disorder too, there was some confusion. So the first 3 times I went in, they always treated me for the eating disorder first, and kind of said, and try to refrain from drinking when they let me go. So I was always like, in the back of my mind, I always thought, if I could just make peace with food, I wouldn't drink like crazy anyways. I drink like that because I dislike my body, dislike myself, can't eat. So basically there was a year of in and out of treatments. It took me 1 year exactly. with 5 in and outs of treatment, 2 of them, the last 2 being specifically for alcohol, to finally sober up. And the way that happened was towards the end, it became very clear that I was going in, I was coming out, resting, recuperating for a couple of weeks at home. And then as soon as I was walking out the door, my feet would take me to somewhere for a couple of beers. And 2 months down the line, I would be sick enough to have to make it back to the hospital. So it got to the point where it's like, okay, I'm 36 years old, and basically I've shrunk my life down to the size of I can't go anywhere other than my parents' house and the hospital. I'm going in this back and forth, and there's, my whole life, it was about, trying to reclaim my freedom and rebelling against all the, boxes I thought I was being put in. But I realized, holy shit, I've done that to myself over the past 20 years. So it was like, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but this ain't working. Like,
it's interesting that you said about getting past the point, because I think when I realized I needed help, I also kind of believed I was past the point of maybe being helpable. Like, oh, well, I've already passed. I've wasted too much time, that you can't pull back from this now. I almost just accepted this is how it's going to be. And
yeah.
and I was just trying not to go. I wasn't trying to better myself. I was just trying not to go further down the hole.
Mm-hmm.
My goals were not to get any better. They were just not to get any worse. And
that, and there's almost that, like for myself, there was even that part of almost wishing, I wish this shit would just kill me. I wouldn't mind getting liver disease and dying in 5 years drinking. It was that kind of mentality, like that sort of hopelessness. Like you can't see any way out. You can't. And I think much of the problem is we can't picture any alternative future because we've never done anything else.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know what Zeynep who doesn't drink looks like. Like you don't know what you do. What the hell do you do on an evening if you don't drink?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like such this vastness of unknown that it's terrifying, truthfully. So, but yeah, I was lucky enough to run into a good doctor, and mine was definitely I did hit rock bottom. I waited till I hit rock bottom to finally get it in my thick head that there was no way but up. But that's certainly not, it doesn't have to be that way. And so that's why I try to be as verbal as I can about my recovery, and let people know.
How did you actually you're not an AA, or I don't believe. What were your steps, or what, not your AA steps, but what was your program that actually got you sober and got you well?
Okay, what got me well was the first part was a psychiatrist who's an addiction specialist who also ran this rehab program. And he's a very old school black and white doctor. And he basically, he's very like, did you get your sleep? Are you taking your medication? Are you eating your meals on time? And he's like, I don't want to hear why you drank, how you drank. I don't want to hear about your childhood. You have to quit drinking. Let's start off from there. Cut all the bullshit. And he basically, once he heard my story, he was like, wow, we got to take some drastic measures here. It's like, you better prepare yourself for, you're going to live with your parents for a while. And let me tell you this, he took away my cell phone for months because he was like, please don't get in touch with your ex. Please don't get in touch with your friends. You're just too close to slipping off the edge all the time. Like, we really need to put you in a little, protected space right now. So I just kind of extended that rehab phase where I came and lived with my mom, had very proper, hours, and kept my social life to a minimum, and just started slowly opening my life back to normal. And that was how it started. It was that, and he was doing meetings at the hospital where he would, teach you about addiction and teach you about creating meaning and values and stuff like that in your life. But it wasn't like a set program. But somewhere along there in my own research, I ran into the Home podcast and what was called hip sobriety. So I was searching sobriety, and of course, seeing hip sobriety being the
Oh
coolest thing.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh, I want to hear about that. Tell me about the hip sobriety, because all these they're doing the boring sobriety, and I don't want.
Yeah.
So I was like, hip sobriety. Tell me about it.
I don't want nerds anonymous. I want
Yeah.
cool people.
Yeah, I don't want to be one of those guys that we see in the movies.
Right.
It was like, and I still had trouble with that when I went into AA during the pandemic with the Zooms. But I'll tell you about that. But I ran into Laura and Holly, and just started following their blogs, and it just made it feel so much more relatable, because I realized at that point I had never seen a woman my age who had a drinking problem, who had quit drinking and was carrying on with a fulfilling life happily, and was still shockingly cool from the outside. It's like, she looks pretty dope. Yeah, if I were to see her from the outside, I'd say for sure she drinks, but she doesn't. So then it can be done. So that really shifted my view. So I started looking into, Annie Grace and just kind of educating myself, and then took one of Laura McCown's courses, and that was a really deep dive work into, some of my feelings and stuff like that I hadn't accessed in my 40 years of existence. So that helped a lot. And then came the pandemic, and then came the Luckiest Club, which you and I are both part of, and that's helped. But also with the pandemic, with these hospital meetings being off, my doctor said, well, hey, why don't you try these AA things? I hear they're on Zoom now. So, and at first I had such inertia. I was like, oh, like I like being part of the alternative recovery things.
Mm-hmm.
I like what the cool kids are doing, but AA, like, do I really want to go there? Isn't that, I'm going to have to say I'm Zeynep, I'm an alcoholic, and, that's just going to make me like every other alcoholic on the planet, which was, a scary thought for some reason. But so, yeah, I started my home group here in Istanbul too. And I'm just working steps now. So I have that. I have TLC, and knock on wood, I feel pretty solid. I'm going strong. It's still pretty hard. I still run into stuff like, oh my God, is it going to be this hard for the rest of my life? And then I say, no, you just keep doing what you've been doing for the past 4 years, Zeynep.
What's hard? Is it temptations or just life getting
what's
hard?
What's hard? I think what's hard for me is the being keeping your awareness, like being alert of what triggers you, and because the cravings can come at any time, and you never really know where it's going to come from. Like, I know in the beginning, even certain types of music would just make me crave something. And then, I would notice certain neon lights at night would trigger something. Like, now I know it changes. If I see someone drinking a glass of wine at a certain hour in a certain setting, it doesn't necessarily hit a spot. But then I'll be taking a walk in the afternoon, and I'll smell a barbecue, and there'll just be a nice breeze, and something will just go, oh, a cold beer would be nice right now. And I'll be like, where the hell did that come from? And then I remind myself, oh, that's my brain. It's because I have this problem, and it's normal for it to do that. But, we've been there. We know not to listen to those things. And we know that goes nowhere, well fast.
Hey, Zeynep, what is for someone that's newer, when the barbecue smell triggers that, what is your go-to, what's your flow chart of how you deal with that?
Well, in the beginning, it was very much from what my doctor said, was to remove myself from the situation. Like, If the music coming from next door is triggering me, ask them to turn it down. If a scene in a, like I used to, we did this thing with my dad, and now we can't because of the pandemic, but we met every week because we had, missed out on father-daughter time for like 20 years. That once I got sober, we started meeting every week, having lunch and going to these movies. And early on, there were at least a handful of movies where we walked in, and within the first 15 minutes, my dad was like, "Is this bothering you?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, there's way too much alcohol. Let's just go have some ice cream instead." And we'd walk out of the movie theater because I just feel it. So, like you and I were talking before, I think one of the most important things is being honest and alert about what's happening inside your body, like whatever you call it. I call it kind of like a short circuit somewhere between my chest and my head. That something just goes bzzzt, and that just goes cold beer, and you don't know what made it do that, but it just comes. And I try to like remove myself from situations. In early days, I found like having a go-to mind emptying sitcom really helpful. Like I had a routine of dinner, then my sitcom every evening. Then by the time the sitcom is over, I'm usually sleepy enough to go to bed, and taking life really easy on myself, staying away from big occasion. Like I didn't contact my high school friends for quite a while just because, I knew I'd be triggered. So I think like being honest with yourself about your triggers is a big deal. Um, Postponing things, removing yourself from situations. The most important thing is you get this feeling that you're going to miss out on life. You're like, but then if I'm going to remove myself, then what's the point in being sober? Then I'm like living like a, vegetable. But the important thing to know is you grow those muscles over time. It's not like you're never ever going to, have fun again, but it's when it's fragile, when it's early on. And I was just saying this to someone the other day. It's like if you have like a hip surgery, you don't plan on going for a jog the next day. There's a certain amount of time to recuperate, and you got to take it easy, and then you start by walking slowly, then da 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 da. And it's kind of the same thing. You got to give yourself, introduce things little by little. But
It's a great point. I think I'm guilty of this in so many things where I try to fix it all in one day. I have the hip surgery and I try to get out and go back to work the next day. Well, I'm going to fail. If I try that big of a goal, it's not going to work, and then I'm going to get frustrated. I'm going to quit.
yeah,
So
and I still to this day I have things and I should know better. It's been 4 years. I know everything works out in its own time. That's like the most important thing, like with the trust with the family
mhm.
and your confidence, and you're getting used to things, and you're slowly getting to know your triggers and working your way through them. It completely works itself out. So like patience and trusting the process and having faith in it is like the number one thing. But even still, I'll admit here, I just put myself back on the market and started using a dating app. And all of a sudden I was like, well, that, and I'm like,
That's just
well, then, so I go to my psychiatrist and I'm like, well, what happens when he asks me, he says he wants to cook dinner for me. What happens? Do I go? What do I say to my mom? My mom's going to freak out. Da, 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 da. And he's like, can you just chill the fuck out? And I'm like, yeah, right. I'm doing it again, aren't I? I'm getting ahead of myself, but yeah, just taking it slow and trusting the process. And yeah, I still have those like, but when is the big job going to come? When is the big, next step going to come? When is this going to happen? I want to get to the point where I have my own place and I have a child and I'm 10, 15 years sober and I've written the book and I've made a name for myself. And, you know,
well,
that's
it's
kind of,
it's tough because we get excited. There I don't know if it's the pink cloud they talk about, but when I got new into sobriety and things started going well, I wanted more of it, and I didn't want to
Mhm.
just go small. I wanted what's next, what's next, what's next. I want all of it, and I want all of it right now.
Mhm.
So and that's dangerous for me because when I don't, then I'll get frustrated if I don't get it and say,
Mhm.
it's not working. I still have these things, so obviously it's not working, and then I'll go the negative. I start to feed off the negative.
Hmm.
So that control is tough.
That's actually very dangerous. Like I've seen people go down like that. Like they're early on, you get so excited, and then you just go past that point. But another thing my doctor would say is, you know, come on, you've been avoiding boredom for the past 20 years by drinking every single day. This time around, what you got to do is sit tight and be okay with being bored. Like he'd actually say this in meetings. He was like, if you have to stare at the wall for 6 months, so be it. Just don't drink and you will have served humanity. And that was his thing. So I went into it prepared to be bored. And I was like, okay, I'm just gonna hang out in my PJs for a while and take it easy. And yeah.
How could you have been, because there's a lot of people that are dealing with a loved one or a friend, a family member, that they want them to get help, but
Mm,
when you weren't ready, just like with that first intervention or whatever you want to call it, and I can feel that pain. Whereas if people pushed me into it, I would have totally rebelled. I would have sat there. I would have gone to rehab or whatever and sat there and pouted and proved them
mm-hmm,
wrong and come out, and I probably would have gleefully drank just to prove them that I told you this wouldn't work. This was a dumb
mm-hmm.
idea. You just don't know. So I would have rebelled against it. But how could, I guess twofold, how could someone reach someone like a Zeynep in their life that maybe won't, you know, how do you approach someone without pushing him? You can't push a rope. You hear that old thing. And I think
Yeah.
that's exactly what it is. I had to, it wasn't until I was ready that I was ready. So
Yeah.
could you have been reached earlier than you were?
That's a really good and a very tough question. Because like when I started these hospital meetings, and at first we were going, my mom and my dad would come too because they were open to families, and like my mom got very excited. So whenever she saw another young lady and she felt this urge to go over and say, "There's hope," just duh, and give her a hug. But I, being on the other side, knew that don't do that just yet. Don't
Mm-hmm.
leave her alone. Don't do that. It won't go over well. But I do often think, well, what would have helped more? I think definitely, first of all, telling someone they have a problem isn't useful because that person already knows. Nobody likes being told, you know, you know it on the inside, and you especially don't want to hear it from anyone else. But I think being asked about how you feel, and I think being heard would have maybe helped more. Like just but I say all these things, but I'm really not sure anything really would have. But what I do try to do now, like when we have newcomers to the AA group, or I see people around me kind of inquire for help or something, I try to say, like, just offer the information, the things that are available out there. You know, oh, by the way, there's all these different kinds of resources if you're ever interested. Put it out there and back off. So that they have that information, that there's multiple places they can go to if they so decide. And so just offer that. And because when you're heavily drinking, obviously you don't exactly have the time and the wherewithal to do research on recovery is hard enough to figure out sober. So but yeah, like say offer certain ideas but back off, and maybe just express loving concern and compassion. That's all. I really don't know. It's really rough being, and I feel terrible about my parents for that, in that sense, because there's really, like, the amount of pain I must have put them through, like 20 years of not knowing where your daughter is, like the phone just suddenly turning off at 2 in the morning on a regular basis. Like, that's hell. And there's really no way I can apologize enough for that or take that back, but by being my best self from now on. And that was like one of the biggest spiritual awakening moments for me was when we started doing these lunchtime dates with my dad, and it was like the second month maybe, and it was like the fifth time or the sixth time, and it had become a regular thing. And I just realized, oh my God, we don't even feel the need to call each other on the morning of the day to say, are we still on? Like, what a relief that, like, for me, that felt like an amazing achievement too. I felt like for 20 years, I've been bailing on stuff that I had every intention of showing up for, failing my responsibilities that I had every intention and desire of fulfilling without, my control. These were all, I wasn't the Zeynep I wanted to be. I knew there was another Zeynep who had all these good intentions, but she was just fucking things up really bad. And I was like, oh my God, my dad literally never has to worry if I'm gonna call and cancel half an hour before ever again, as long as I don't fuck up my sobriety. And that was like a huge relief. And I was like, oh, and I don't want to do that. Like this is too precious for me to, you know, take away from myself and from them ever again type of understanding. And so now when it comes, I say, oh, this sucks. I really envy those people who can go to a concert and have a couple of cold beers, but then I go, but I know that would ruin my life. And so now I look on the other side of, well, now I get to remember concerts. And that's just the way my life is from now on. And, just shift your perspective.
Yeah, if I give myself it's not, if it's an option, then I always want it. If the
Mm-hmm.
option is removed, and if I can't get something, then I won't waste the time on it. So if I can remove alcohol where it's not staring at me, now that's hard to do in life, but that's what I'm working on, is just making it, well, it's not a choice. I don't have that choice anymore. So it doesn't, there's no purpose in lamenting over it. Now
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't, like when that barbecue smell comes along and wow, a cold beer would be nice right now. Those things are still going to hit. But
Mm-hmm.
if I can say when that smell, yeah, that sure would be nice, but I can't. End of
Yeah.
discussion. It's not, but I'm going to try not to. Opens, there's a chance still. I'm going to try not to means, well, but I still might. That gives me
Yeah.
uh it gives
The
my situation a chance to get what it wants. But if I
Yeah,
say I
there was a
can't,
point when I made that kind of a shift, and this is what Holly Whitaker calls the never question the decision. And I came to that once myself, during these in and outs of treatment. And finally, I said, at a moment of clarity, when I had, okay, this isn't working, you really have to change this. And then it occurred to me that, okay, next time, you start having doubts because all these questions keep popping back into your head. But then how am I going to have fun with my friends? But then how am I going to da da da? But then what am I going to do at weddings and all these things? What am I going to do if something terrible happens and I don't know how to cope? There was a point when I said, okay, when those come, just remind yourself that you spent 20 years making this decision. It took you 20 years to come to the conclusion that, okay, this isn't working. We've been through that. We've made that decision. We don't question that anymore. It's kind of something that worked for me in the beginning. And another good note is it doesn't always continue like that. Like the first time I went to the pool and had a nice long swim, and I came out and I could smell French fries. And I realized, and French fries obviously used to go really well with beer. Like that was my breakfast, lunch, and dinner for many a years. And when I first realized that, I was like, ooh, I'd love to have some French fries right now. After a nice swim, I'm really hungry. And I noticed, oh my God, I didn't even think of beer right now. Like I was actually just craving. I worked out, I'm hungry, and I want crappy food. And I was like, that's so cool. My brain is rewiring. And so once you notice that happening and you start putting, I used to say, put those in your pocket, you know, make a mental note of that, because then you're like, when something else happens, you'll know that this isn't forever. This is happening now, but my brain is going to rewrite this too, you know?
That
So,
was one of the big eye openers with me was earlier this year when we went to the first time. It was just a guy on a stage with an acoustic guitar, but still it was an outdoor. Well, it was a outdoor scene, but there was alcohol around. A lot of other people were drinking, but it was the first time I was with the family, and I caught myself laughing and having the asterisks of I'm having fun, but I'd rather be drinking, but I'm not drinking beer. That's why, I'm having fun, but it was gone. It was just
right.
strictly, I'm having fun. I was having a blast, and
Yeah,
I caught myself laughing like I thought I would never laugh again, like that
I
only.
know
And that was,
that
wow, this
happened
is
to me too.
great.
When you have that first like full belly laugh, and then you suddenly have that moment of realization, you're like, I'm totally sober. And I just laughed like I didn't think that was possible
Didn't
for
think it was
anyone
possible.
without alcohol. I didn't think that happened. I thought that was an intoxicated laugh.
Yeah.
And once you start having those, it's important to keep those always in the back of your mind and just hold on to those and know everything is temporary. And life is just life.
I think I
Sobriety
had one of
isn't
those not too.
sobriety isn't the only thing that's hard in life.
Oh
you know.
yeah, well, exactly. I mean, but drinking adds a whole lot more hard to my
Oh
life
yeah,
um,
for sure.
than just what life gives me. You know what? One of the other ones, Zeynep, that I had recently was music. There's certain. I'm a fan of the blues, and those days when you're drinking, you can hear the music, you can feel it, and I thought I'm never going to enjoy that kind of
Hmm.
music again without as much as I enjoy it with alcohol. And the other
Hmm.
day I had just was cranking some tunes in the head, and I realized I was enjoying it just like I thought I would never enjoy it again. I thought you had to be drinking to really
Hmm.
feel it and enjoy it, like, but it was a first time that I went, wow, this is right where it was before without
Well,
it.
you know what? On that note, I'll have to say, like, certain things, I used to put my headphones on and listen to music all night, in the dark in my room. And I'd actually write my journal stuff like, why is this my only happy place? When I'm alone drinking at 4 in the morning with this notebook and blasting my music. And especially some of the music I listened to in like the very last period of my drinking, they still ring those bells. And so when I first like started going for walks and stuff, I want to put music on, but it really like, I don't know, Rush or Eric Clapton or Tragically Hip or whatever it was I listened to at the time, those just automatically take me to that feeling. So for a while, I put on like, MTV's top whatevers. I was like, okay, looks like I'm going to have to listen to like Taylor Swift and Pink for a while.
Yeah.
If that's the case, so be it. And I came here and I was like, okay, well, let's figure out what Turkish bands there are out there, because I've certainly not drank a lot with Turkish rock bands. So, like,
Mm-hmm.
that's another one of the things I do. I just open up Apple Tunes and I say, show me something I haven't heard before that doesn't have that neural connection. So, like, that's still something I'm working on. But, like, that's why community is so good too, because I hear from you that goes away too. So I know that one day that'll, go away for me as well. It takes its own time for everyone, and
The
that's
gifts
the way
the
she
gifts
goes.
dribble in. They're not just a one-time shot, and it makes the journey fun. Do you still journal?
I journaled really well in between Laura's courses. For a while, I did morning pages really well. To be honest, I have not journaled that well since the pandemic began. When I noticed I was journaling less, so I was doing the morning pages, and that felt good, but it also felt like I was kind of dabbling in not so positive feelings first thing in the morning. I felt like I want to start on a lighter note, and here I am, getting stuck in my own head. So I did that for a while. Then there was a period when I just started doing very simple gratitudes in the morning. I was just like, just open your notebook, do 5 bullet points of whatever comes to mind. And so it's like less than 5 minutes, literally. As the kettle's on for the coffee, you can do it. That I actually felt really good. Like I could feel a shift in my daily thinking. Right now, I'm not. Um, but also, I have to say, in the process, I'm kind of also learned to not beat myself about it, because I know I have waves of things come and go. Like sometimes I don't do yoga for months, and then I have another 3 months when I feel like doing yoga. So if it doesn't feel right, I just say maybe now's not the time, because there's you don't have to be on a growth and optimum path all the time, but there are other things I pay attention to. Like in the meantime, I don't, you know, I still pay attention to my sleeping pattern, and, making sure I eat on time, because I definitely still confuse thirst and hunger with I want to drink.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing how my brain does that. I just go, oh, it's just hot and I'm thirsty. And here I was thinking I wanted a beer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I encourage myself to be creative, but I don't
Yeah.
force myself to journal, because it's just like an exercise. If I force myself to do it and it's not there, I might get the benefits from it, but I'm going to burn myself out. I'm going to say, you know what? I'm done with it. I quit. This is not fun. So
Yeah.
I encourage myself, but I don't force it.
Yeah.
I look for, okay, if you don't want to journal, what's something else? What could you do to get your,
Right. That's something I do. I make sure that I'm doing something. Like what am I going to do for self-care today? Like what am I going to make sure do to keep my center in place? And like sometimes it's yoga, sometimes it's like, oh, the weather's really nice and I feel like taking a walk at dawn this week, and I'll do that for a few days. I kind of have, phase. I go through phases, but with the journaling, I still, I keep my notebook at hand, and right now it's more like I check in once every 10 days and say this is what's going on and stuff like that. So
I want to read your pre-sobriety journal. I think kind of
oh
some
my
of the
god.
things you said, I bet that would be just fascinating. Because you know what? Because like so many things, I guarantee reading it, I would just be hearing myself saying it.
Some of it is so bad. Like I had no idea it was so bad, and I was aware it was bad, but like some of it, like I know there's really not much point in talking about all the terrible times, but there are pages in there where I've like stayed at someone's house and showed up at the office at 7, where we don't usually start till 9, and I've shown up at the office at 7 and I'm cracking open a beer just so I can wake myself up,
Mm-hmm.
and still contemplating, but I'm almost passing out in front of the computer. This is the time frame where I need to decide, do I find an excuse and run away from the office and not show up for the day, call in sick for the day, or do I crack another beer open, chug that, brush my teeth before the boss comes, and can I pull this day through? And these are like 10 years before I got into treatment. Can you imagine, like, that shit was happening? And yeah, it's
I worry
really.
that sometimes we have to exhaust our excuses, exhaust our band-aids, our quick fixes, because I think for me, it wasn't until I was out of excuses, I was out of lies, I was out of justifications,
Yeah.
when I remember the day just sitting there saying, I got nothing else. I got nothing to say, not only to the family, but to myself. I
Yeah.
I have nothing left.
Yeah.
I sat there and I couldn't even fight back anymore. And luckily for me, I think I was a day away from losing my job, getting the DUI, killing someone else,
Hmm.
let alone myself, losing my family. I got off easy, but
Yeah.
that's how close I was. But and thank God that I did, because I don't know.
Yeah,
I
but
just,
I had I had a couple of accidents, and crazy enough, they were both morning accidents, like the morning after accidents. And cops were like, obviously, just out of formality, we have to do a breathalyzer, and they do it, and they'd be like, and I'd be like in my suit, dressed up, going to work, and they were like, let's try another machine. This must be wrong, and you know, so it's a miracle that I'm here, I'm alive, and thank God for how resilient our bodies are and how they can recover. And so, like when I'm able to do a workout and when I wake up in the morning and I don't hate myself, I'm like, thank God, this is worth it. I don't want to fuck with that. I don't want to lose that. That's way more precious than, anything beer can offer me for 20 minutes.
well, put the book out because I'm ready to read it. And I will, I think your stories are incredible and I cannot thank you
Don't tell
enough.
me what to do, Jeff.
Exactly. Just encouragement. No, that's, I, you're, you, I love hearing your stories. I can just feel the pain and so many of them. I may be hearing you say them, but I'm seeing myself in those pictures and
Hmm.
it's just, it breaks my heart, but I also can laugh about them and smile because I know that I'm doing um, what it takes to ensure that they never happen again.
Yeah.
Is
And the
my
same goes for me. Like when you tell the story of like the last Super Bowl weekend and what happened with your kids
oh
and how
yeah,
you interact with your kids now. And when I see your pictures of, and this is what Grandpa Jeff looks like now. And
yeah.
it just makes my heart go, oh, so it's not you can't run the show yourself. You gotta, it's so inspiring, and to be reminded of the hard times, to be reminded of all the good that lies ahead and stuff like that. So we keep each other, we
You
keep
know
each
that
other up and keep each other going.
the pain of those things like that Super Bowl weekend was, which was February. My sobriety day is February 3rd of 2020, right after that Super Bowl weekend. But that was about the time when the grandbaby number two was born. But I just thought of this the other day. It was 6 weeks before I held that my grandson because I don't know if I was trusted um, by my daughter,
Hmm.
rightfully so, not I mean totally rightfully so, but I also don't
Yeah.
know if I trusted myself. But it was, I remember the day I did when I held that baby and it was like 6 weeks and this is the first time and I thought, man, incredible. Well,
Yeah.
Zeynep, thank you so much for being here.
It's been a
Great way to
pleasure,
start the
Jeff. I
weekend.
love what you're doing here. I love that. I love the way you come up with ideas of questions to tackle and panels, and the way you're coming up. How else can we think about this? So I really look forward to seeing what you do in the future.
Well, it's all it's I'm totally serious when I say this. It's for me that I do all of this. I love that other people are enjoying it, but I do this for me because it's keeping me. It's what I need to keep my mind going in the right direction, to train myself, to analyze myself, to learn, so that I can
Hmm.
continue. So this is a selfish endeavor. I love that other people that you enjoy it, but this is for me for sure. Well, anyways, thanks so
Cool.
much. Have a great weekend.
Thank
Hang on there for
you.
just a second, and we
Alrighty.
will be back on Tuesday, everyone. So have a great, safe weekend. Keep talking to each other, and this, that's where we make this thing work, is together. So have a wonderful time, and I'm heading to the river later today, and then to Camel Stock. See you, everyone. Hold on.